Have you ever tried to make a big decision about a city and just felt totally lost, like you were drowning in data? Well, today we're going to look at a completely new way to understand our cities. So forget about all those endless spreadsheets and disconnected maps. We're about to explore how to see a city not as just a pile of data, but as a living, breathing, connected network.
Okay, so first things first, we need to really get our heads around the core problem. It's a challenge that everyone faces, from city planners to small business owners. I like to call it the urban data puzzle. All right, let's make this real for a second. Imagine you want to open a new coffee shop, maybe somewhere in Atlanta. How in the world do you find that perfect spot? I mean, you need to know about property values, zoning laws, foot traffic, how close you are to a transit stop, the local demographics. The list just goes on and on. How do you bring all of that together to make one single smart decision? Right now, it's kind of a nightmare. Every single piece of that puzzle lives in a completely different place. You've got property records on one government website, zoning maps buried in some PDF, transit lines in another file, and demographic data in these massive, clunky spreadsheets. They're all totally isolated. Trying to see the big picture is like trying to build a jigsaw puzzle when you have no idea what the final picture is even supposed to look like. Well, what if there was a better way? What if we could just shift our entire perspective on what data even is? This is where a truly revolutionary idea comes into play.
Just think about it for a second. On a social network, right, you understand a person by their connections, who their friends are, where they work, what events they're going to. So, what if we did the exact same thing, but for a city? What if a property could be friends with its zoning district or be in a relationship with a nearby park? That's the core idea, a social network, but for places.
And this social network for places actually has a formal name. It's called a knowledge graph. And honestly, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a way of looking at knowledge that focuses on the graph, that web of relationships between things, instead of just stuffing data into boring isolated rows and columns. And this slide really shows you why this is such a game changer. A spreadsheet can tell you what a property's address is. That's it. A knowledge graph, on the other hand, can tell you how that same property connects to a nearby school, why it's impacted by a new transit line, and what other places share those same connections. You go from knowing simple facts to having a deep, meaningful understanding. Okay, so that's the big idea. It sounds pretty cool in theory, right? But let's actually see how this thing works in the real world. We're going to walk through how you'd actually build a smart map of Atlanta using this exact approach. You know, it really just boils down to a super simple three-step process. First, we pinpoint the location of everything we care about. Then we connect all those things to other relevant data. And finally, the fun part, we get to query it. Basically, we start asking our new intelligent map some really interesting questions.
So let's start with step 1, pinpoint. Before a property can have friends or connections, it needs to exist in our network. You can think of this like creating its profile page for the first time. We just give it a unique name, and most importantly, a physical location on the map.
Now, don't worry if you're not a coder, you absolutely do not need to be. All this little snippet of code is saying is, hey, create a new thing, let's call it a parcel, give it the ID ATL123, and pin its location to these exact coordinates. That's literally it. We've just put one single property on our smart map. Then you just do that for every other property in Atlanta. Okay, so once we've pinned all our properties and we've connected them to other data, like zoning info or flood zones, this is where the magic really starts to happen. We can actually start having a conversation with our data. We can finally move beyond those simple spreadsheet filters and ask much more intelligent, location-aware questions. Something like this, for example. I mean, trying to answer this with the old tools would be a huge headache. With our graph, we can just ask. And this is the language we use to ask it. Again, look past the syntax for a second and just notice how much it looks like our plain English question. It says, match every parcel where the distance from its location to the city center is less than 1,000 meters. The logic is so direct and intuitive. And this is the payoff. This is what makes it all worth it. The answer you get back isn't some giant, overwhelming list of addresses in a spreadsheet. It's a visual answer. You instantly see a map of Atlanta with all the matching properties highlighted. You get an insight, not just a data dump. You see the pattern, not just the list. So this is so much more than just a neat visualization trick. This is where it all comes together, where a cool map becomes an absolutely essential tool for making big, real-world decisions. This quote from the source material just hits the nail on the head.
Spatial intelligence. That's exactly what we've been building. It's the ability to not just know facts, but to understand the context and all the relationships that come from physical location. And that context, well, that's where the real value is hiding.
And what that intelligence does is it unlocks a whole new level of decision-making. I mean, think about what this really means. You can ask the graph to calculate the potential return on investment for every single property within a 5-minute walk of a new train station. That's not just finding data. That's literally economic forecasting. It lets you figure out if a huge new development is even feasible before you spend a single dime. So at the end of the day, what we've created isn't just a static picture. It's a dynamic digital model of the entire city's data ecosystem. It's kind of like the difference between looking at a photo of a car engine and having a full interactive 3D model that you can take apart and see exactly how every single piece works together. It just lets us make smarter, faster, and way more confident decisions. And that brings us to one last thought. We've seen how this technology gives us this incredibly powerful lens to understand the complex reality of a city right now. So the really exciting question is, if we can model a city's present with this much clarity, what could we start to ask about its future? And how could those answers help us build better cities for all of us?